Darling, we've had one hell of a time, but the question on everybody's mind, where is the
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm guessing the time that you're going to be listening to this. My name is Matthew Rosenberg. I am a comics writer and apparently now a podcaster, or pretending to be one.
Congratulations.
And this is, thank you. Lateral moves. And this is the podcast known as Ideas Don't Bleed. I had to look at the little thing at the top of the screen to remember what we called this podcast. And I am joined today by my lovely, supple partners in crime.
Hey,
I hate saying it. I hate saying it so
you don't
much.
have to.
At some
You don't
point,
have to. It's not in the contract.
At some point, we're going to discuss where it comes from. Why you guys are called the Supple Boiz?
The mind of Ryan Stegman is.
I assumed it's such a
the
disgusting
only
thing. I
answer.
assume it came from Ryan Stegman.
Yes.
It's disgusting.
But the reason we stick with it is because no one ever forgets it because they hate saying it so much.
It's true. It's disgusting, and everybody seems to like it, and it makes my skin crawl. The Supple Boiz.
We are the Supple Boiz.
Ethan and Griffin.
Hi,
Hello,
everybody.
gentlemen.
I'm Matt.
Hi, Matt. I'm so happy to be here with you on another episode of Ideas Don't Bleed, your hit podcast.
I don't think we have the numbers yet because we haven't put any podcasts out yet. But my understanding is that the head of Apple thinks that we're going to be the #1 podcast of all time.
Oh my God.
Is that correct? Is that what you guys have heard?
Tim Cook sent you an email in the middle of the night to say, you've broken Apple Podcasts. Also, can you help me? I think someone used my credit card to subscribe.
I don't know who Tim Cook is. This was a guy named Apple who emailed me. But yes, I think we're doing it. I think, this is it. This is the height of pinnacle of success. And in that, I wanted to make it even more special in our whatever number episode this is, because sometimes we may be taping them and putting them out of order. But I wanted to take us to new heights we've never reached before and have a very special guest. And I think I accomplished that. Our special guest today is Mr. Gerry Duggan. Gerry, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Matthew. I'm so glad to be here with you and the Supples.
Every time it sounds worse. It sounds like
expert branding. You're gonna have to get on board.
No, it's really good. It is really good.
You guys probably played it right by not telling me that that's what you were tag teaming as before I got into the
Yeah, I think we're already like an explicit content podcast just by like having that in the name. Probably can't even be on iTunes. They're like, this podcast has Supple Boiz, definitely not running. Like, if there's any kind of algorithm, we are locked out of it now.
Well, think about the fact that we for a time had to plug the URL suppleboiz.com.
I think we're on a lot of watch lists.
I do feel like the more you say it, the worse it all gets for you.
Oh, okay, cool.
Okay.
All right, so we'll try and be reserved about it.
I mean, there's a good chance you guys can't fly
the
on
Sups,
planes
we
now.
have to change it. We're the artists formerly known as the Sups.
Gerry, let's talk about things that aren't disgusting. Let us talk. We're not gonna talk about your upcoming book about monster dicks just yet. Although that is a book that exists, correct?
Yes, it was. The project was codenamed King Dong. I spoke to in a very simple way. Along with Scott Koblish, we worked for years on Deadpool together, and I was saying to him, hey, it'd be fun to do something together, create our own. I have a couple of ideas, and it actually mirrors exactly how I got started on Deadpool with Brian back in the day.
That's beautiful.
I pitched a couple of ideas, then there was the idea to make Scott laugh that I was like, okay, and then we'll pick something else. And I was like, it's an anatomically correct monster attack. The monster comes ashore and roars, but not out of the end that you are accustomed to seeing in 100 years of kaiju. It takes a big giant 3-story shit and it goes downhill from there. But it's a physical monster with physical needs. And it's definitely something that you have not seen before. I will challenge everyone about that. You know, you've never seen a monster, and you know, like all good monster books, it's also parable for our you know, Godzilla was you know, a great metaphor for the atomic age. Here we're tackling global warming via very warm poo and other monsterly secretions. But it opens with a very classy quote from the great philosopher Roger Ebert. I do think it's the. I think it's the. I think truly we do like a good job of working in a lot of smart jokes around all of the stupid jokes. It's really our aristocrats. And so it'll hit, you know, we're tentatively threatening the world with it in time for Halloween.
It's beautiful. And there'll be more details to come on how to get it at a certain point.
Subscribe to my Substack to be the first to know.
And I think the nice thing is, I don't know how many conventions you're doing coming up, but I think you have already coined, I think, the best thing to put on your next convention banner, which is an actual monster with physical needs. If you put that, Gerry Duggan, an actual monster with physical needs, I don't see how you're not going to be the hit of the con.
We've only ever seen the monsters when they're hungry. We haven't really met the monsters when they're horny and
Look, you can keep coming up with good slogans for convention banners all day. Get it? But actually, I don't. I figured rather than talk about an upcoming book that isn't quite announced, we could talk about something that you have going on right now, which is your photo book, which is on Kickstarter.
I'm very excited about that. It's the pandemic forced me to obviously sequester at home, and I was not walking around shooting photos like I would have been. The gift of that was to be able to sort of take stock of what I had photographed over the last 20 years. And I did, it started almost as a, like a janitorial or custodial task of going, hey, is all this stuff backed up? You know, I have a unlimited Dropbox because of the comic files, and then I'm actually really glad because I'd found some hard drives that I thought were up in the cloud that weren't, and then I was finding photos that I loved that almost shouldn't be associated with me, that they were so good, and then finding a lot of stuff that I thought was good that I thought, oh, this is kind of pedestrian. The nice thing about the photos, I think most of them anyway, were shot with a Leica camera back in the day when David O'Sullivan and I had analog optioned by Chad Stahelski to be a feature. I threw some of the option money at a camera. I've always loved photography, and that's in the book. It's more or less an autobiography through photos of my 20 years sort of Forrest Gumping through Hollywood and comics. So I may not be your favorite comics creator, but I probably have photographed them, candids and portraits and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I sort of wanted to like dive in on that a little bit. This might be clunky because I'm a seasoned veteran at interviewing people about comics now. You're our third guest. So like I've kind of said everything there is to say about comics, so I wanted to go into the world of photography. So some of this is going to come from a very lay perspective, I guess. But I feel like your book, which I looked at an early build of, and it's gorgeous. And obviously, you know, anyone who knows you knows your photography stuff and is in love with it, and you're sort of known as like the guy around comics who's taking the beautiful pictures behind the scenes. And but the book is so beautiful, and I sort of wonder, to back it up a little bit, I know that a lot of film directors like got their start as doing photography, or like that's a side passion for them. Is that something like you went a different route? You're a writer and you're a comic book writer. Is there a connection there? Is there something do you see a connectivity between writing comics and being a photographer? Are these totally separate things?
No, it's a great question. The truth is, I always wanted to be able to draw, and I never had the skill, and I was never good enough. But the impulse to, try and create a visual image, though, has basically, transferred in my brain from trying to draw with a pencil in my hand to trying to shoot something indelible with the camera in my hand. And, as I've gotten better over the years, I think it's really become almost like a prosthesis. I try not to be seen photographing. I'm somewhat successful at that. I went all the way to Japan, and the laws there are different. If you take a photograph of someone here, you own that photograph. That's yours. They couldn't demand that you say delete it, or they might be able to, but they wouldn't have the legal standing to do it. Over there, you can ask someone to delete it, and that would be well within your right. So I was trying to be I'm always trying to be a little respectful, but I think the great street photographers are actually up in people's faces a little bit. And, that was the thing that really sort of got my passion reignited was, hey, getting invited, it's a great privilege to be invited to go to Comic-Cons around the world. What you don't really want to end up doing is sort of sitting in a hotel room or writing a script, waiting for the con to start. I'd rather be outside walking around the city, exploring, new places, and having the camera, in your hand while you do that. You may find things. I've certainly also been able to find reference. So the one art is feeding the other, of, being able to share with my collaborators in comic books some of my photography, to go, hey, something like this, don't exactly feel like you have to do this, but it does inform the other. And I've always wanted to shoot film. When I first got out to Los Angeles 20 years ago, I was meeting with agents. They were reading my writing. I wasn't, even comics were percolating. I had yet to work with Noto. Hossein and I were working on a script called The Last Christmas about Santa Claus after the apocalypse. But in talking to those agents, I'd say, here's my, apocalypse comedy horror. Here's my coming of age movie about a kid that builds a submarine in high school. And here's my fantasy. And, they would just sort of say time out and just go, I don't know how to sell you. You're really all over the place. And actually there is sort of a controlled chaos in the book that feels like that, because some of it is behind the scenes, behind a curtain in a place you don't ordinarily get to experience being in. And then some of it is obviously street photos from around the world. It only really makes sense because you're following it through my lens, whether or not probably you have a much greater chance to enjoy it if you are my fan. But if you're not, if you are coming into it cold, I'm going to be very curious what the experience of the book is like.
I see, I get your point, and I think there is a good insight into you, and as your friend, I really appreciate it. But I would disagree that I think it's really a fascinating sort of look at just capturing a person's life in a interesting way, and I think you do a great job of selling it to people. Like I don't think you'd need to be a fan of yours or know who you are or know who the comics people are. Obviously, I think the people who listen to this podcast will recognize that, Jason Aaron and John Hickman and Brian Bendis and all those people are in the book. But I think even if you don't know those people, the shots are beautiful, and you're seeing a process that people don't get to see, and I think that's really amazing.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. I again, I had a lot to work with, and if nothing else, it's a Leica lens that I think is the best glass in the world. So even though, you know, you're seeing two comic creators conspire in almost near dark in some of them, and I do call out where very specific things happen in these moments that actually did affect comic books. You know, you know from going to those Marvel retreats that most of the like big bangers of an idea actually don't occur in the room. They occur at night while your brain is marinating on what happened in those meetings, and then all of a sudden at night your brain goes, hey, what about this? The what ifs start coming out. And literally I just had my camera in my hand when some of those things were happening, especially in the Krakoa era, where Jonathan and Pepe and RB had come to the table with this brand new way to see the mutants. And then, you know, I was very lucky. I was coming back from space at that moment. Guardians was wrapping. I didn't know what I was going to do. I was actually planning a pretty aggressive push into creator-owned stuff. And then it became, when I heard the first time the House of X, I just knew going in, oh, Hickman has a X-Men story. What I didn't understand was that idea was how fertile it was, how much oxygen it brought to the room, where you know, there are ideas that are so big, that run so hot, that steal oxygen. This was exactly the opposite. This was almost an operating system, and all of a sudden the thought of maybe never getting a crack at any X-Men or X-Men family book, all of a sudden it became, hey, we need a line of books. Does anyone have ideas? And like, you know, like it just, it really was lightning in a bottle in so many ways. And, you know, again, the right place, right time, that's where the title comes from. You know, that's been my story. You know, obviously I've been very lucky to have great collaborators, but you know, so much of this stuff is just going, holy smoke, the stars aligned, you know?
Yeah. You know, I sort of, I'm fascinated by you're talking about being, you know, in the room and having your camera at hand, and that gives you an advantage. I wonder also, for some of the stuff you're shooting, obviously, you know, the stuff with comic stuff, that is, you know, you're in a room that where everyone understands why you're there. You're there because you're on equal footing with Jason and John and all these other creators and Donnie and me and whoever else at Teeny and all these people who are in these photos. And then there's ones where, not to besmirch you in any way, but you're around people who are quite a few notches in fame above you. You have photos of, you know, Mark Hamill and Clint Eastwood and
yeah, it's you know, again, like I didn't use Forrest Gump lightly when I sort of described like my trajectory through it all. It's funny, you know, I thought pre-comic books, my journey I thought was really into being a late night writer. That was what I thought I was going to do. You know, I was reading comic books until Letterman came on, and then when Letterman came on, I put the comics down, watched Letterman, and then went to school very tired the next day. And so coming out to Los Angeles, you know, I didn't have a car, so my first job was Golden Apple Comics. Very lucky to get that job, but then also talk about timing and luck. That was pre-Iron Man, so the town, you know, the town's gaze fell over comics in this big way, and then all of a sudden I thought I was going to have to save for a car to get a job, to get into production, to work my way up as a PA and some of these scenarios. And then, you know, in through the door was marching, you know, everyone in Hollywood. So even from that, being able to then pivot into and bring some of my writing talent into Hollywood for shows. I ended up at the production company that was wrapping Mr. Show at the time, and then being in the same offices with so many of my literal heroes, and then learning from them. And sort of like the first time you make that room laugh, you know, Hossein looked at me and goes, "Good job, now write 10 more," you know. And I was like, oh. I was like, shit. I was like, all right, I see how it is. But you know, that's the, you know, Los Angeles is one of our biggest cities, but it's also, Hollywood is a small town inside of it. And so award shows you know, like I didn't have my camera back then, but I worked on the show VH1's Big in '03. And, you know, Beyonce was like the like up and comer, you know, and like in a room full of stars, she walked in and like the orbits changed. You could just feel everyone go, oh, there's a star. And Clint had that same ambiance about him. You know, he walked into the room almost like a low pressure system, and no one said anything, and you could turn and just go, oh, there's Denise. And then I did something spectacularly stupid. I offered him some of our Lafroig 12, forgetting that he had been sober longer than I'd been alive. And he was very cool. He just said, no, thank you, young man. I don't imbibe. And that was that. And then later we had another moment. I really was trying to photograph Ann V. Coates, who I think probably and arguably cut the most famous shot in cinema history in Lawrence of Arabia, that long shot. And then later had a couple of moments with those two. And, you know, again, they're just moments in time that are stolen by photos. You know, I wished I'd had my great camera back then. You know, and a lot of this also due to when, you know, Patton Oswalt would be asked to go host award shows, and you know, he's the biggest fan of this stuff in the world, and obviously writing for Patton, there's no easier job in the world. So when Patton's off stage, his brother Matt and I just try to listen to the show in case there's something that occurs that he needs to know about while he's sort of mingling with everyone. And you know, they're very fun, very chill events. They're not televised for the most part. You know, they're industry events. The Visual Effects Society Awards are so cool because we're all such big fans, and you know, getting to then meet some of the people that you know we have been so fond of for so long is very gratifying. It's cool. You know, there's one funny story that the pictures are not in the book, but the year that Gravity was up for actually Gravity was so good it was competing against itself. So Gravity interiors and Gravity exteriors of the space station were up for the best awards that year, and we got there early to the Beverly Hilton, and we're sitting in this love seat, me, Patton, and his manager, and in walks Sandra Bullock, and we kind of bumbled into each other to get up, and she just looks at us and she goes, oh, forget it. You know, and Patton just goes, oh, thank God. And that was like how the evening started, and everyone wants to come to play. You know, that's the fun thing. And then being asked by some of those folks, hey, you got a joke, and you either have one or you don't. But in that moment, you flip one off, and hopefully it hits. If it doesn't, you buy him a drink after.
I remember years ago, and I don't know, we can cut it if you stole the joke, but I think you were staying on my couch for a couple of days after one of the Marvel summits because you had work in New York, and you were like, I'm gonna get a hotel room, and I was like, no, crash with me, save yourself some money. And we were just hanging out, and you told some story, and you're sort of known around comics for being one of the like great storytellers. You command a table really well, and you were telling some story, and it was incredibly funny, and I was like, man, Gerry, do you ever think of doing stand-up? Like, you're so funny, and you're friends with, you know, Patton and Posehn and those guys. Like, do you ever think about that? And you just looked at me and you went, why would I want to stand in front of a brick wall and talk about my dick? And that stuck with me so much that I was like, that's the funniest response to asking someone if they want to be if they ever wanted to be a comedian. But I think it's also like just such a fascinating take, because to me, I'm like, oh yeah, Gerry definitely, like, if I didn't know, I'd be like, yeah, Gerry definitely set out to be like a stand-up comic, to be that kind of like a storyteller comic. And for you, but here we are, and you like being behind the scenes, and you like being behind the camera, and I think that's fascinating. I think that's sort of a fascinating thing that we don't see a lot, and I think the book sort of celebrates that in a fun way, if that makes sense.
It does. I mean, I went I went to college at Emerson, and that was there were performers there. There was opportunities to sort of honestly learn to do stand-up without actually trying to go do stand-up. I thought about it, and I certainly, have done some performing. I actually went to Emerson to study Shakespeare. So I was there under Kristen Linklater, and I just didn't enjoy the business of acting. And then I didn't let that sort of, being a stand-up, I think, is the toughest job in the world. I love going to see them. What I actually really like to try and do more is get something down that is permanent on paper. That was, I can hear those things. I'd like to think I'm quick on my feet. I wrote live television for a long time. And so nothing in comic books has ever been as challenging as going, you have a live show in 15 minutes and these people need something to say. It's just, so print deadlines become, you're trained in Denver at live TV, and then you go down to print. And it's hard to get that experience anymore. So I love comedians. I love what they do. They are brave souls exposing themselves to the world.
Sure.
But I always just tried to sort of write the jokes more than get out there and do them. And really, the fun thing about those shows is, I don't think I've ever written anything, for Patton that I didn't then go, well, I can't take credit for that because there were 3 other jokes. I wrote the caboose of that or whatever, like they become something entirely different. So honestly, like in those situations where, you just never want to feel like you're alone, especially in a room that you have so many peers in. You have nobody has to carry the world at that moment. Somebody might have the great joke. So I met Drucker through that, and Mike Drucker, very funny comedian and writer. And it's fun. It's honestly just fun. That's work that is fun. Like the night ends, you high five everyone goes their separate ways, and the next year you do it again.
Yeah. I the thing that fascinates me is I feel like a lot of the and I don't think you're this person by nature, but I think that looking at the photos is so interesting to me because I feel like a lot of people, if you put them in these rooms with these people, they're going to shoot their shot in a sense. Like you're in a room with J.J. Abrams, you're in a room with Ryan Coogler, you're in a room with people who can make careers, you're in a room with people who you want to ingratiate yourself to, and you're behind a camera taking photos of them at the time. And obviously you're talking to them and interacting with them, but like it feels like there's something beautiful because I know you could put 1,000 writers in there and they're all going to be trying to spend as much face time with them, and you're literally putting something between your face and theirs. And I think it's really beautiful, and you capture something really good in that. I mean, there's a photo of Ryan Coogler in the book that, like, it's a very simple photo, but it's beautiful, and it's really it gives you the feeling of being there, which I know means that in a sense you weren't there in that moment.
Yeah.
You were
I want to
removed.
try and be invisible. Yeah, it's I don't the idea about being there but coming away with something that is a stolen moment feels really fun, and that's what photography is. It's our safest way. It's our only way right now to travel backwards in time and actually be there and actually have it work. It's again, the funny thing is, what I try to do is bring that same sort of quiet street style to those rooms. If I'm on the subway, I'm doing the same thing.
Yeah.
There are a few shots in the book where you can see me looking the other way than I'm actually shooting in reflections. And I do that a lot. Because I think those moments are more honest when someone is not really aware that they're necessarily being photographed, even though I think everyone should have no expectation of privacy now at all. Walking out around, you're going to be on somebody's GoPro on top of a motorcycle or a security camera, or honestly, the photography that I do almost feels more honest. Like in a world where everything is on video forever. and available to everyone. It's a quiet moment that I hope is beautiful.
And that brings us to the end of part 1 of our discussion with Gerry Duggan on his career and his new photo book on Kickstarter, Timing/Luck. Make sure you check out the photo book by searching Timing/Luck on Kickstarter or just clicking the link in our description. You can also check out Gerry's Substack at gerryduggan.substack.com to see everything else that he's working on. To get the latest episodes of this podcast, as well as news, giveaways, and even comics delivered straight to your inbox, go to ashcanpress.com and sign up for the newsletter. We'll be back next week for part 2 of our discussion, and in the meantime, you can write to us at ideasdon'tbleedpod@gmail.com or tweet to Matthew Rosenberg at Ashcan Press on Twitter, me at Tales to Astonish, or Griffin at Griff Sheridan. We'll include some of your correspondence on the show, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And big thanks to Summer People for our theme song, Where's the Poison? Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.